In this episode of Rich in Relationship, measuring what every business partnership I work with measures the same things: revenue, profit, growth, maybe cash flow if they're disciplined. And those things matter, right? Because in a capitalist society, in a business, the health of the business is measured by those things. If we're not making a profit, if we don't have cash flow, the business isn't surviving, and survival is primal. But here's what I see over and over again. The business looks like it's working, and the relationship underneath it is quietly breaking down. Or the numbers are strong, but the decisions feel harder than they should. Conversations feel heavier than they should, and something just feels off. And no one can quite point to why, because you're measuring the business, but you're not measuring how you're operating together. And for that matter, maybe you're not even looking at, if you're working with other people, what's your culture like? If you're not looking at how you're operating together, if you're not looking at the vibe, the feeling, the culture of your business, then you're not measuring what's really important. And this is something that you can feel and you can see, but it's harder to measure. I work with couples and partners where on paper everything looks fine, the business is stable, the strategy is sound, nothing is obviously wrong, but when you sit with them for a short time, you can feel it. It's like a hesitancy or a tension underneath the surface. There's a lack of clarity in how they're actually functioning together. And the problem is, none of that shows up in your P&L. It's more like an emotional balance sheet. And if you don't know what a balance sheet is, Google it, because it's really important to your business, by the way. And an emotional balance sheet you won't find in Google, by the way. An emotional balance sheet is your relationship in the red or the black. That's the best way to put it. So let me make this real. I worked with a couple where the business was doing well. Good revenue, good clients, no major issues, but every decision felt like work. Not just effort, but like friction. It was like car where the gear oil was low in the transmission. It was just like, it couldn't change uphill, couldn't change hills, uphill couldn't change gears, noisy. They'd sit down to talk through something simple and it would take twice as long as it should. They'd revisit the same topics again and again. And when I asked them, how do you know if your partnership is working well? They didn't have an answer, not a real one. They had, we're doing fine, we're not fighting, the business is growing, but that's not a measurement. And by the way, how much was the business growing? You know, most people are satisfied with 5 or 10% growth, but you could have much more growth if your partnership were crack-a-lackin'. And truthfully, doing fine, that's not where most people get stuck, because if you don't define what working well actually looks like, you default to the numbers. And the numbers can hide a lot. They can hide resentment that hasn't surfaced yet, misalignment that hasn't cost you yet, decisions that are slower than they should be, until one day it does show up. And now it feels like it came out of nowhere, but it didn't. You just weren't measuring it. You weren't looking. This is something I had to learn the hard way myself. There was a period where things looked good from the outside. Work was moving, life was full, nothing was obviously broken. You've heard me talk about it. You know, that day where I prostrated myself on my kitchen floor because even though I had the beautiful house and the beautiful wife and the beautiful car and a successful business, everything felt heavier than it should. I was freaking miserable. And at work, conversations took more effort, decisions didn't feel clean, and there was this low-level sense of friction that I couldn't quite name. And the reason I couldn't name it is because I wasn't tracking it. I didn't have a way to say, this is working, but this isn't. And so everything got lumped into, we're fine, we must be fine. The P&L seems to say we're fine, until even that wasn't fine. That's the problem with not measuring what matters. You don't see the drift. You only feel the consequences. So here's the shift. You need a simple scorecard, not for the business, but for how you and your partner operate together. And it doesn't need to be complicated, but it does need to be specific. What does this actually look like? It looks like measuring things like how easy are decisions right now, like on a scale of 1 to 10. Not whether they're good, but how clean they feel. Are roles clear, or are we stepping on each other? Or maybe roles aren't clear and things are slipping between the cracks. Are we aligned on direction or revisiting the same conversation? Does communication feel open or does it feel like we're holding back? And here's the key. You don't answer those once. You revisit them, because these things drift. Emotions drift. And if you don't catch the drift early, you end up managing the consequences later. I've seen couples start doing this in a very simple way. Once a month, they sit down, not to solve problems, but to assess. Where are we actually at emotionally? How are we feeling about working together? How are we feeling about the people we work with? How are we feeling about our business? And the conversation changes. Instead of what's wrong, it becomes what's working and what's working that could work better. And that's a completely different level of awareness, because now you're not reacting, you're tracking. And when you're tracking, you can be proactive. You can adjust early before it becomes tension, before it becomes frustration, before it spills into the relationship. I'm saving you a lot of marriage therapy here. So listen up. Here's the part most people miss. If you don't define what healthy feels like, looks like in your relationship, you will always default to, we're fine, we're surviving, the bills are paid, kids are going to school, business is successful, we're fine, even when you're not. So if something feels off, but you can't explain why, don't look harder at the numbers. Don't look at the beautiful house and the car, because I'm telling you, when it's off, it's off. Start measuring how you're actually operating together, because what you measure is what you can actually improve. What doesn't get measured doesn't get improved. And if you don't measure it, you're just guessing. And guessing is where drift begins. And I'm not just talking about your relationship here. If you've got employees, your culture may be drifting. Your employees may be drifting. If you're just measuring their performance and not measuring how they feel about their job, if you're not making sure that you feel fulfilled, your partner feels fulfilled, your employees feel fulfilled, then there's drift. To some extent, you can measure this with customer satisfaction, but truthfully, we can all fall into routines where the customers are satisfied, but not feel necessarily fulfilled and happy ourselves. And what do you do if you find out that it's not where you want it to be? What do you do when you find you slipped into drift? That, my friends, is a topic for the next episode of Rich in Relationship. If you like what you're hearing here and you want to hear more, subscribe, share this, help us grow this mission that we're on to help partnerships thrive and prosper joyfully.